Hey everyone, welcome to GeoLens. Today we're diving into a fascinating question. Why are some countries better at innovation than others? The answer might surprise you. I'll be exploring a key concept from Mark Taylor's book, The Politics of Innovation, Why Some Countries Are Better Than Others at Science and Technology. Mark Taylor is an associate professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology and an expert in international relations. He authored the book, which was published in 2016, about 2 years before the US-China trade war. I will extrapolate how the concept of creative insecurity developed in the book can help to explain China's reaction to the trade war started in 2018. Keep in mind that this is my analysis and not the professor's. So buckle up. We're about to challenge some common assumptions about what really drives technological progress. When we think about what makes a country innovative, a few factors are usually presented as common sense, such as 1. Strong property rights and patent laws. 2. Generous R&D subsidies. 3. Top-notch educational systems. 4. Robust scientific research. 5. Capitalism, a common misconception, but that's a subject for another video. 6. Liberal democracy. 7. Decentralized administration. 8. Consolidated institutions. Sure, these all can play a role, but they don't tell the whole story. There's a hidden factor at play, one that's rooted in a country's political landscape. Enter counterintuitive concept of creative insecurity. Countries innovate best when they're in a sweet spot between feeling threatened from the outside and stable on the inside. Let's break that down. External threats could be things like 1. Potential conflicts with other nations. 2. Dependence on food or energy imports. Internal stability factors include 1. Low workforce dissatisfaction. 2. Low levels of inequality. When a country faces more external pressures than internal ones, something interesting happens. Political support for innovation surges, overcoming resistance from groups that might normally try to slow things down. But why would some groups slow things down, one might ask? For instance, if a country doesn't have a lot of external threats, but is stable internally, political support for innovation might be low, with politicians favoring legislation and regulation that incentivizes resource extraction or real estate speculation, and they generate far less aggregate value than more productive sectors. But if external threats increase, then not possessing a diversified industry and control over patents poses a significant existential threat, tending to unite political groups that would otherwise not see eye to eye. Let's look at how this plays out in the real world, starting with the United States. The US spends a ton on its military, arguably to combat external threats. But here's the catch: it's struggling with internal issues. 1. High inequality. The share of income earned by the top 1% in the US is 20.09%, according to the World Inequality Database. 2. Workforce dissatisfaction. 78% of American workers are living paycheck to paycheck, according to a survey conducted in 2023 by payroll.org. 3. Civil unrest. The U.S. houses around 20% of the world's prisoners. 4. Opioid crisis. Not to mention the loss of lives. Economically, the opioid crisis is estimated to have cost the U.S. $1.5 trillion in 2020, and the number is probably much higher nowadays. So while there's this push for innovation driven by perceived external threats, the internal instability is putting on the brakes, and the results are notable. In 2022, more than 40,000 artificial intelligence patents were granted to investors from China, while in the US it was only 9,000 patents. When it comes to trademarks, they grew by 12% between 2012 and 2022 in the US, whereas China's assigned trademarks grew by more than 40,000%, according to the US National Science Foundation. That's right, more than 40,000%, that's 40 times over. Now let's hop over to China. Here's where things get really interesting. China's dealing with some serious external pressures, but internally it's relatively stable. This makes China primed for rapid technological development. This situation perfectly illustrates Taylor's creative insecurity concept in action. In 2018, the US initiated a trade war with China, aiming to curb its technological growth. But here's the kicker: this move might be backfiring spectacularly. By ramping up external pressure on China, the US is inadvertently creating ideal conditions for Chinese innovation. Let's break this down. 1. External threat increase. The trade war, especially restrictions on tech exports to China, has drastically increased the external threat China faces. 2. Internal stability. Despite these pressures, China has maintained relative internal stability. 3. Push for self-reliance. In response to US restrictions, China has doubled down on achieving technological self-sufficiency. A prime example is China's push in the semiconductor industry. When the US restricted chip sales to Chinese tech giants, it didn't cripple China as intended. Instead, it sparked a nationwide effort to develop domestic chip manufacturing capabilities. This aligns perfectly with Taylor's creative insecurity hypothesis. The external threat posed by the trade war has united Chinese political and business interests, overcoming internal resistance to push for rapid innovation. The numbers back this up. 1. China's R&D spending has increased from $465 billion in 2018 to $667 billion in 2021. 2. Patent filings in China accounted for 46.8% of the world total. 3. Government funding for education grew by 6% in 2022, reaching almost $860 billion. 4. The government promised to increase spending on science and technology by 10% in 2024. Ironically, the very actions meant to slow China down are propelling it forward at an unprecedented rate. This suggests that the trade war strategy might be fundamentally flawed if the goal is to maintain US technological supremacy. So what are the implications of this backfire effect? 1. Acceleration of China's tech independence. The harder the US pushes, the faster China might achieve self-sufficiency in critical technologies. 2. Global innovation landscape shift. We could see a more rapid eastward shift in the center of global innovation than previously anticipated. 3. Unintended consequences for US companies. US tech firms might lose access to the massive Chinese market, potentially hampering their own innovation capabilities. This situation raises some crucial questions. 1. Is the current US strategy counterproductive to its long-term interests? 2. How might this accelerated Chinese innovation affect global tech standards and markets? 3. Could this lead to a more divided global tech ecosystem with competing standards and platforms? As we can see, the concept of creative insecurity enables us to understand how trade wars are not only ineffective, but also tend to backfire. It's a stark reminder that in our interconnected world, actions intended to hinder a rival can often have complex and unintended consequences. If you're interested in learning more about this concept, I posted the link to the book in the video description below. Until next time!